Hi, I'm Brainerd Carey, and today I'm talking about part one of how to be a successful artist. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what art school, what universities do for artists today. And I mean, we're in 2021, and this is what universities has been doing for decades. But I want to explain a little bit for those who are either in art school, thinking about going to art school, or have been to art school. There's a reason for going to art school, or there can be, and I want to explain what those are, so that if you're not going to art school, or haven't been to, or don't want to, you'll know what people learn there. So art school is something that's asked about a lot because artists wonder, is this part of being successful? Do I have to be in an art school? Do I have to have gone to a good art school to be successful? And the answer is absolutely no. You don't need to go to an art school. Historically, artists haven't gone to art schools, right? The history of artists, there were no MFA programs or BFA programs until fairly recently. So, and there's countless examples of artists who are successful and haven't been to art school. But still, what does art school give you? How does that contribute to success? And I want to explain that because the art schools create what's called the academic art world. And the academic art world has its own notions and ideas of what success means. So, okay, to begin with, if you're getting a Bachelor of Arts, that means it's your first experience out of high school working professionally as an artist and learning professionally, rather, as an artist. And what art school teaches you is really how to defend your work. And I'll explain that more, but it's an odd thing, right? You'd almost think that art school teaches you how to make art. But the truth is, in 90% of art schools, or probably more, techniques aren't taught. How to paint, how to sculpt is not taught. You may learn something about sculptural techniques or using a foundry or with paint, how to stretch a big canvas or something. But basically, they're not going to teach you how to paint. They're not going to teach you how to sculpt, what subjects matter to pick. So you're on your own there and you're looking at what other people are doing. What they do teach you is they have deadlines and you have to make art based on, the classes that you're taking. And what they teach you to do is to defend your art. And this is, by the way, in a Bachelor of Art program as well as a Master's of Art program. And this happens all over the world, whether you're in Spain, Russia, the Middle East, or the US or Canada. Programs in art teach you how to defend your art. And what that means is when the artwork is done, you stand in front of the class and you say, this is what I made. It's a painting of, a tree that I love in my backyard. And then, people in the class will ask questions. Why do I care about the tree? That doesn't look like that interesting a tree to me. That's kind of shocking, right? Like, well, this is a tree that meant a lot to me, and I'm showing you the tree. I mean, the artist is defending the work. And so that can be difficult, right? And the teacher and other students weigh in. Well, yeah, I like the tree. It just doesn't strike me as a particularly exciting tree. I think, there should be apples on it or something. And then you can respond and say, well, it wasn't an apple tree. That was a cherry tree from my childhood. And this goes on, right? And it may seem almost a little absurd, but the idea is that you are defending your work. And so if that process works for you, and it doesn't work for every artist that's in college, by the way, some that helps, some it doesn't help, but this is one of the main things that it gives. And I was told this, by the way, also by Robert Storr, who was the dean of the School of Arts at Yale University for a while. So this is one of the biggest schools in the arts, and like all the rest, what they are teaching you is to defend your work and not teach you anything else, more or less. And so again, defending your work means when people criticize it or say, I don't like that tree, or I don't understand what you're doing there, you can come back and explain what you're doing there. And what that does is it gives you a certain confidence, right? If you can endure that, and if that works, it gives you a certain kind of confidence. Especially if someone's, if you're in a school you're getting an MFA, the critiques, as they're called, can be kind of withering. They can say things that seem mean. I don't like that work. It's ugly. It's not communicating its message. I'm not interested in your politics, or I'm not interested. People will say things like that. And again, that's a little shocking, right? So you have to say, okay, what is that about? Why are they asking that? And you have to defend your work. So defending your work, being able to defend your work, and being to articulate um, why your work is the way it is, and why it has a message that's working, is important. It gives you confidence, and it also teaches you a little bit about how to write, right? Because it's teaching you how to speak, essentially. If you can defend your work and say why it's a good painting or a good sculpture or a good drawing, even if someone else or several other people think it's not good and they don't like what you're doing, that's a powerful thing to build. At least that's what art schools believe. It teaches you how to defend yourself. The downside of that is if people are always kind of throwing insults at your work, it can be it can really upset artists. It can destroy them and feel like, I don't want to make this, or it can make you very insecure that you don't know what you're doing with art, and why am I in this school? And they might think teachers will think that's part of the process. Keep making your work, but it can be very difficult, right? Because you want to learn this school and you want to be happy. So okay, art school and what it's for, it teaches you how to defend your work. That's probably the most important aspect. At least Robert Storr, the former dean of the Yale School of Art, believes so, and many other people are set up the same way. I've also talked with other deans in universities, and that's basically their stance. It teaches you more or less how to defend your work. It does not teach you how to sell your work. What it also does teach you is about the history of art. You'll be reading about other artists in history. So if you're working with sculpture or painting or graffiti, you'll learn more about the history of sculpture and painting and graffiti. And that helps you understand a little bit more about what you're doing that's different or the same. So that's an important aspect of what could be learned in art school. That is an aspect that could also be learned, of course, on your own. You can research about and read about art history. So, but that's an important thing that they're giving you there. The other thing they're giving you is a community, right? You're meeting other painters, other artists, other friends, and those people could potentially become friends after you graduate, and they could be part of your support group as you're entering into the art world. One thing I mentioned briefly before is that they don't teach you how to sell art. I have a community and I write books on how to do that because I went to college and I got a BFA initially, and I didn't know how to sell my work, and I wanted to. And it took me a long time to figure it out. So it's important to learn that lesson too. And college does not teach you that. I know because I give lectures at colleges all the time, and they're hungry for this kind of information because they don't have it anywhere else. So, okay, there's an important aspect of history, right, and also of politics and literature in making art. And this is something you will also learn in college, in academia. Because in this talk today, I'm talking about what does college do for you? So what is that about? Well, that's about if you're reading books along with, and this will happen in any art degree, you're usually reading some important books, everything from the Western canon, Herman Melville, and other great writers, to contemporary writers on theory. All of this can be seen in the syllabus of colleges, and in Praxis Center, I also teach a lot about reading different things. But the idea is this: when you read books, when you read classic books, and when you see great movies, those movies and those books are commenting on our history and who we are as a people, right? So when you read these classic books, whether they're about I don't know, something in the Midwest in America, or something anywhere in the world about a relationship or a drama or a romance, this is how we communicate as human beings, right? We write books, we write poems, and in these poems and in these books, we're talking about ideas that are sometimes easy to grasp and sometimes not so easy to grasp. So as an artist in school, as you're reading about other books that have to do with, fiction and stories and other people's lives, as well as nonfiction, history, you can begin to incorporate that into your work, right? And then your work feels to you like it has a more important message, because maybe it is talking about a romance or a relationship in a certain time, or maybe it's talking about, an aspect of social justice or politics or a vision of the world you want to see. But you're in dialogue with the world, right? We're all in dialogue with the world. What do we want? What do we don't want? What do we accept from the world? And what don't we accept? These are all important issues that could be in your art. And before art school, most people come into art school thinking, I can draw, I can paint, I can make nice looking flowers, a landscape, and you're right. But when you leave art school, what you have is something else. You think, I paint landscapes that have to do with perhaps, my mind and how I'm seeing the world, and I'm interested in alchemy. So when I look at a landscape, I see, kind of magical things happening, and the way the light and the land work together to create some of the mythologies that I've been reading about in alchemy, or something else, right? So it's a different take. You're talking a little bit differently, but it's not art speak. It's not something that doesn't make sense. There's more depth now. You're talking a little bit about books that you've read, and you're comparing it to that. And just as writers are part of a history, as an artist, you're part of a history. So you're explaining in your writing about your work, and in your defense of your work after school, you're explaining the history that you're part of, and you're explaining, if you do an artist talk, or if you're talking about your work, you're explaining the stories in your work and how they relate to history in general, to the history of literature, could be to the history of movies, could be to the history of human beings, sapiens. So, that's essentially what college does for you, right? You get this education that again, does not teach you how to make art. There's no, in the history of artists, typically people don't go to art school, right? And even now, there's plenty of outsider artists, so called, that don't go to art school and do very well. Again, what art school does teach you, because I'm going over different aspects of success here, and one of the biggest questions I always get is, should I go to art school? So the big takeaway here is, you could go to art school if you want, but what you'll essentially learn is, one, how to defend your work, how to reply to somebody by practice when they say they don't understand what's going on or they don't like your work. And you'll also learn about more books and reading, so you have a little context for your work, right? So you can reference other books or see what other authors or poets are doing, and then do a little bit of that in your own work. And finally, it's also a community that you can have and meet friends, ideally, if that works for you. And after college, you'll have those friends as a support group. So, okay, in retrospect, in summary, let's look at what college does for you in terms of success. It teaches you a little bit about world history, and gives you, if you're the type of person that benefits from it, a little more confidence in your practice. And also, it brings you into what's called the academic world, right? The world where in colleges, people are interested in what you're thinking about and what you're writing about. And that world does extend to museums, because the curators went to colleges and they're interested in what the artist is thinking about, what's going on. So it allows you to communicate in an academic world, right? Which again is a very small part of the art world. Museums are that, nonprofits are that. Galleries have nothing to do with that world. Not that they may not be interested, that you went to college or a good college, but galleries are not interested in the academic world. They're interested in selling work, period. So I'll talk more about that, but that's a different world. And you can graduate from an amazing college, you can make great work and not sell the work and not reach out to galleries, because you were never taught how to do that. But you can feel successful as an artist because you understand what you're painting, you can defend what you're painting, and you understand the history that you're working within. And you can see that that's a limited sense of success, because what every artist wants that gets out of school, or most artists want, is to sell their work, is to make that 4 years or 6 years of schooling worthwhile, so they can sell work. So I hope this was helpful. This is part of a series of how to be a successful artist. And I think it's very important to talk about the pros and cons of college. And and that kind of learning for artists, because historically that's not been necessary. And today it's still not necessary, I believe, but I want to point out what it means to be successful as an artist and what it means in the context of a university. Why get a university degree? So I hope this is helpful. I'm going to go through more aspects in this multi-part series of how to be successful as an artist, but I wanted to get this college aspect out of the way, the university aspect out of the way, so you can understand a little more what academia means when people say, oh, that's a very academic artist, or that's an academic, show. It means that they're coming from school and they're talking about, writing and history and perhaps literature and references to that history, which may or may not work for you. That's neither high or low in the art world. That's just one small aspect of it. The academic world and the world of colleges and artists graduating is very small compared to the gallery world, which is a big world. It's a whole huge world that carries many different types of dealers that can sell in many different ways. There's nothing standard about galleries. Whereas trying to be the artist that college taught you to be works in some places, but not in others. Because what galleries are really interested in is, can I sell that painting? They want to hear more about you. And if you have that kind of history in college, or you've been reading books and you relate to some of the things that I've been saying and have learned all of this without college, which is possible, galleries are interested in that too. What's your story? What's this work about? So we'll talk more about that and success in terms of galleries next. But I hope this is helpful in terms of framing exactly what universities do and don't do for you, and why to go to art school or not go to art school, why it's important or not important. Because those are all aspects of this world, of this academic world in art. So if you continue with this series, you'll see that I go through various aspects of success in the art world, what it means to be a successful artist. And this is something that most artists are reaching for every day in one way or another. And the question of whether college helps is always involved in that. So in Praxis Center, which is the online school that I teach, we go over these issues. We students and members not only learn how to defend their work in studio visits, but much more. We have curators there that are academics. We have curators there that are not academics, and they're talking to you about how all this works. So as a member of Praxis, if you are one, you can see those in the roundtable recordings. Otherwise, if you're not a member of Praxis, I hope this is helping. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask below. Otherwise, I wish you well with your art practice and your art.